Selling or buying a home can be stressful, even if you're working with a professional real estate broker like myself. Chances are your client will have to hire various professionals throughout the process, either preparing the home for sale or fixing any of the numerous issues that can pop up in a home inspection. I'm Jesse S. Gines, broker and owner of Gines Investment Group and RE Property Services. I've been in the real estate industry for over 20 years, and it's my goal to take everything I've learned and share it with you free of charge so that you can be the best real estate agent or investor that you can be. But don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This is the only way that I can make sure you're getting all of my newly updated videos and continue sharing my knowledge with you free of charge. So let's get started. The process is by far the most important training that you will need when getting started in the real estate industry. Whether you're a new agent or a new investor, not knowing the process can either make or break your career. The last thing that you want to do is neglect knowing the real estate process, no differently than you would want to recommend an unreliable contractor who delays or ruins your home sale. Now, I've experienced firsthand the work of numerous local contractors and professionals, and I know which companies will produce the highest quality work and which ones to completely avoid. I understand it's detrimental to the sale or the purchase process because I want our clients to have the most stress-free and successful real estate experience as possible. I'll recommend only the best professionals in a variety of specialties, from title companies, mortgage brokers, lenders, home staging companies, general contractors, title companies, mortgage brokers, plumbers, painters, electricians, you name it. But I have personally worked with each professional that I would recommend. And so the process of buying or selling a home is pretty lengthy, but without knowing it in and out, the rest won't do you any good. So I want to take this opportunity to point out this process so that you can study it and have an excellent opportunity to be successful in the real estate business. So let's get started on that. Now, a property buyer and a seller will both experience different parts of the process. However, the process as a whole remains the same. Let me point out the two sides of the same coin. So the seller will hire an agent to list a house, while the buyer will hire an agent to find one. And as a buyer or seller's agent, you will have to experience one side. But as a transaction broker, you will have to know the whole coin. So I'll lay it out as a transaction broker so that you can get familiar with the whole coin and then later choose heads or tails. Now, the first step will be finding a listing. You will need to meet with a client and prove that you are the best agent to work with. Then you will have them sign a listing agreement. Now, listing agreements vary by state, so make sure that you use the correct document approved by an attorney and or the National Association of Realtors. In Florida, these documents are typically called FAR bar approved. These documents can be acquired from your broker. And during the listing meeting, you should have found out if the property will need immediate work in order to sell faster and get the price that the seller is expecting, or if the property needs work before going active. So if the property needs work before going active, make sure it gets done. You will want to have a signed listing agreement, as the seller may opt to choose another agent during the repair process. So you can get a signed listing agreement and set a later date for the property to go active. I can't stress this enough. If you recommend someone to do that work, you must be the one to follow up with them. If any problems occur, you will be held responsible. And if you are not 100% certain that the person you recommend will do an outstanding job, don't recommend anyone. In recent times, you can simply refer your client to an internet search. So, once you and the seller have agreed on the terms of the listing and the repairs have been completed, make sure the contract is filled out properly and signed by all parties, in case the client wants something changed before the listing goes active. Now, once you're done with that, you're free to move on to the next step, which would be fulfilling your listing duties. Your listing duties should include hiring a photographer or personally taking pictures of the property. That's one. Listing the property on the MLS, if you're a member of the MLS. Making sure your listing populates in the common websites like Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, and all the other ones. Placing a yard sign and a lockbox per contract. and continuing on. So now the property should be active and accessible to buyers. You will be ready to move on to the next step. Once the property is active, you should start receiving inquiries for viewing appointments. And in this video, I will assume you have a buyer and have helped them look at other properties, as that's part of the process on the buyer side. Now, having a buyer, here's what you must have completed. You've had your buyer sign whatever agreement is mandated by your state and broker. You've made sure that your buyer is either pre-approved for a loan or has a proof of funds letter from the bank showing they have enough cash to buy the home that they are searching for. You've set appointments with listing agents and shown their listings to your buyer. Now, in this scenario, we will pretend that your buyer didn't like any of the houses that they saw, and now you have your own new listing and they love it. So your state may have a transition to transaction broker agreement that will need to be signed when representing both sides of the transaction. This agreement will typically change your fiduciary duties to each party. So check with your broker about the state laws and requirements necessary to be a transaction broker and represent both sides of the deal. Sale and purchase contract. Your buyer will agree to an offer price. And if all goes well, your seller will agree to that offer. Now, the offer will be filled out on an as-is contract for sale and purchase document provided by your broker. If the seller doesn't agree with the offer, they can counter-offer a price they're willing to accept. If the buyer then doesn't agree to that counter-offer, they can counter to the counter-offer, and let's just hope they finally come to an agreement. Now, the buyer and seller have agreed, and both parties have signed the contract. The buyer side of the process continues while the seller side is temporarily on hold. On the buyer side, earnest money deposit. So on the buyer side, they will have to make an earnest money deposit to the title company, typically chosen by the seller. The title company will hold that deposit in an escrow account, and it will be put towards the buyer's balance at closing unless one of the parties backs out of the deal. If so, it will be given to the appropriate recipient. You will go on to the inspection. After the EMD, earned money deposit, is in the escrow, you will have your buyer hire an inspector to inspect the property. Sometimes their lender will do this. But the inspector will formulate a report showing anything wrong with this property. And once the buyer receives that report, they will decide if they want to move forward with the purchase, request repairs, or get a credit or change the offer price. Addendums. On the seller side, they will receive the request to either agree to it, neglect it, or negotiate. If anything is changed, such as the sales price is decreased or an agreement to fix or repair something, it must be put in writing and signed by both parties of the transaction. This document will typically be called an addendum to the contract and can be acquired from your broker. Survey. So after the buyer hires an inspector, they will have to hire a surveyor. Now, the surveyor will formulate another report showing the property lines, and more negotiations may be made in the event that that property line is not what was reflected on the listing. What problems could occur? Well, it may be that the neighbor's fence is impeding on the subject property line, or vice versa. If any changes are made during the negotiation, another addendum must be signed by all parties. Don't forget that. Next, we'll move on to an appraisal. Hopefully all has gone well until this part. So if a buyer is using a lender to secure the funds for the purchase, they will need to hire an appraiser to show the lender that the property is worth close to the amount the buyer is offering. Cash buyers may also want an appraisal, but may also choose to skip this part if they simply want the property and they don't care about the price. So sometimes a lender will provide their own appraiser, surveyor, or inspector, and if this is the case, the buyer won't have to hire the ones provided. But on the buyer side, make sure that if the lender is hiring those individuals, the buyer agrees with the price because it may be severely overpriced. So if the property doesn't appraise at the amount the buyer or the lender is comfortable with, they may choose to back out. There are usually inspection, survey, appraisal, and financing contingencies in the contract that allow the buyer to back out of the deal within certain time frames. And so if the buyer backs out during this process, they will have to sign another document provided by a broker to back up. So now that all these parts are complete and both parties have chosen to move forward, the buyer has an obligation to solidify their loan. You must make sure that the buyer is doing whatever is necessary in a timely manner, as with a real estate deal, time is of the essence. So make sure that you follow up with your buyer on a consistent basis to make sure they're doing what needs to be done to get that loan secured. So back to the seller side. Let's back up a bit and touch on the seller side, especially concerning the inspection period. When your seller receives a repair or credit request and agrees to it, they will have a certain period of time to complete the requested repairs. This is sometimes difficult as time is of the essence, and they may not be able to hire a contractor or get the repair completed in time for closing. So many times, if a repair is done, it must be done by a licensed contractor, and proof that it was completed must be given to the buyer. So a lot of times the buyer feels, oh, I can fix that, I can do that, I can fix that outlet. But the seller might say that, but the buyer might disagree and say, yeah, I don't want the seller fixing an electrical outlet unless they're an electrician. So the buyer will also get the opportunity to inspect the repair and decide to move forward or back out. Sometimes a seller will pay for a repair only to find out that the buyer doesn't approve of the repair. This results in a loss of money and time and will definitely negatively affect your relationship with your seller. So that's very important. The best way to handle a repair request is for the seller to offer the buyer a credit. Now, this typically lowers the selling price, but makes the buyer have to handle the repair after closing out of their own pocket. And most of the time, a buyer may not have the money available to pay for a large repair after closing. So, this is your time to shine as an agent. You need to negotiate and close this deal. Whether you're doing a credit or whether you're formulating a repair, this needs to be done in a timely manner and it needs to be done right. So let's move on to financing. So before closing, the buyer will have to secure the loan if they're not paying cash for the property. Many times the lender doesn't even pull this file until closing day. Now on closing day, you might find out that the lender's underwriter needs more information from the buyer before releasing the funds. This will result in another addendum extending the closing date. Don't panic, because this is typical, and it should have been expressed to both the buyer and the seller upon signing the contract. That's the best way to get around these disappointments. When they're signing that contract, you let them know, okay, the closing date is tentative. Most likely it may get extended for about a week or two. So we're just going to mark this closing date for now, but please understand that later it may be changed if a title company or the lender needs to extend it. So to be safe, let them both know that it's typical before the closing day to be extended at least 1 week beyond the closing date. So on the seller side, the title company may need an extension as well in order for the seller to take care of title issues. This is also typical. There may be an outstanding lien that needs to be addressed, or an issue with the deed, or a problem with the legal address. Give your sellers a heads up on these potential issues upon signing the contract. It's always better to tell them in advance that these things could pop up instead of it being a surprise. So, if all these moving parts work together properly, with your help, you've managed to close the deal. Both sides will take a sigh of relief, and so will you after you receive your paycheck. Now, the process is exhaustive, but crucial to having a successful real estate business. If this process scares you or makes you take a second look at jumping into the real estate business waters, I suggest you find another career, because it is intense and it does need to know in and out, but practice makes perfect. If you keep going through this video, writing down this process, you will definitely get familiar with it. So I didn't want to sugarcoat the process, so I made sure to place it in the beginning of my book. And push comes to shove, and you simply pass the book on to someone else that maybe they're ready for the journey. However, if you're ready for the challenge, continue watching my videos. I'm sure they will be a help to you and make you be the best agent that you could be. Hey, do you want a free copy of my new book, Real Estate Success? Simply like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I will send you out a free copy today. In this book, I have an entire chapter about the process, as well as proven secrets that will help you become a top agent in your field. Thank you for watching. I'm Jesse S. Guides. Until next time, God bless you on your journey.